Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the Pro Football Story Channel. I'm your host, Flink Evan. Today, we'll be discussing the top 12 seeds in the NFL and how their season went. We'll go them over very quickly, and then we'll go into the possibly my draft coming up in a week, less than a week from now. So, we did the two seventh seeds, the Eagles and the Steelers. So let's go off with New England. Um, the next, the sixth seed in the AFC. Now, we got, their season went, there was some rough patches, but started off somewhat slowly, and then they got on a roll until the bye week, and then for a reason they didn't really play that well after the bye week. Um, they only won one game, 1-3. Again, there were some decent opponents. The only one was in Jacksonville, 50-10 win. But going into the season, I thought maybe they could win 12 games, maybe 11, and I know a lot of people thought it was they took the under. Sorry if you hear that noise in the background, but so their season basically came down. Could they beat Buffalo? And they did once, but the playoffs they had no match. Ultimately falling 70-47, and just the game didn't go well. They could not stop Buffalo. Buffalo took advantage. They kind of figured out what they needed to do against the New England. In the first game, it was super windy, and it was the offense for both sides wasn't that effective, but you could lean on the run game and ultimately throwing three passes or whatever was ultimately all they needed to win that game. So let's go back. Let's look at what they possibly draft. They have him against Evan Lloyd, linebacker. Who can you can play some outside linebacker too, and even be in pass rusher occasion, but he's my type of linebacker and most people's, I believe. And that's possible. Other possibilities obviously is a safety. Uh, they like to get those. Say they Kyle Duggar they drafted a few years back. I don't know where safety will fall here. Obviously, the top two for most people were Daxton Hill and Kyle Hamilton. Could even go corner. They lost J.C. Jackson for agency. Offensively, they need receiver help. Um, you know, everything else is pretty good. So we'll see. That's the possible direction. Now we'll go on to the Raiders, who don't have a first round pick, so we won't have to discuss that very long. Whenever it loads and backs me up. Well, again, the Raiders, the the fifth seed in the AFC. They went 10-7 as well. And I was underwhelmed by this team going into the year and even watching them. But they found a way to get to the playoffs. They had these close wins like the Ravens win in overtime and another overtime win against Miami. Then John Gruden gets fired or leave, resigns, whatever. Maybe the Henry Ruggs situation before the Dallas game, I believe. It was around this time. But then they have a win against Dallas in overtime on Thanksgiving. Yeah. Like the best performer, they played offense played really well against the Eagles, which a lot of quarterbacks, high tier quarterbacks, did play well against them. But then they had these losses like the Kansas City games where they just got dominated. And even last year they had a win against Kansas City, so and then another couple close wins, ugly games. They beat the Colts, which is, game they were not favored to win going in Indy, and they went on a game-winning field goal. So ultimately, they get in the playoffs. And, it was a fair matchup. They played the Bengals. I thought the Bengals would win, but knowing that they played early in the year, the score was a little misleading. It was a much closer game. And, this game came down to, controversial non-whistle whistle play. And then late in the game, they drove down the field and just couldn't get in the end zone. Ultimately, I think Pratt intercepted the ball. So going to this offseason, now they got Devontae Adams in a trade, throwing their first round pick. Offensively, maybe some offensive line help. They can get that in the draft. They got pretty much everything else. And then defensively, I wouldn't really mind that. They draft anywhere. I mean, they got some, for chain defense. They got Chandler Jones and they got Max Crosby as their edge rushers on their team. And corner-wise, they got Mullen. And they drafted some safety with Abram and stuff like that. Still, they could even go there. Linebackers, they probably need help with. Really anywhere defensively. Even if it was an edge rusher again, Chandler Jones is up there in age. I know you just signed him, and Max Crosby extended. But you always need a third guy. And right now, that Cleveland Farrell pick hasn't worked out, and you don't really expect that to change much, but only they really know where he is in his development or if he's ever going to develop into a player they thought, drafting him fourth overall. So, again, no first round pick, so we're going to go to the next pick in the Arizona Cardinals. It's a team that started off the season really hot and just didn't do well late in the year. Started the year 7-0, had the Green Bay game, which they made tons of mistakes. They could have easily won that game. Again, the Packers had a lot of guys, I think 11 starters out for that game. So that was a bad loss, even though it was to a good team. So just lose at home on a short week against a team with a bunch of starters out was not good. Then they win against San Francisco. I think Colt McCoy was playing that game, and Colt McCoy plays the next week, and they get beat by the Panthers, which is a little surprising now looking back because, the Panthers were struggling at the time, but they didn't turn it around at all even after that win. They beat some okay teams on below average. They lose against the Rams in a decent close game on Monday night. Play the Lions, they get upset by them. Got dominated on all phases of the game in that game. So just a very odd season. You get dominated by like the Lions, who are the second pick in the draft. You got you got wins against pretty good teams like the Rams early in the year. You dominate the Titans, who was the number one seed in the AFC. Beat Dallas, a playoff team, even after you were struggling a bit, losing 3 in a row. And they even lost to Seattle when they're trying to play for the better seed, and Seattle wasn't that dominant. I know they played better into the year, but they're just going into the playoffs with not a lot of confidence, or at least not on looking at it from afar. And then they lost to the Rams, and Kyle Murray obviously didn't play well, but the whole team didn't. There was not much I could say offensively, defensively that the Cardinals did well with. It's kind of one-sided, even though if you look at the beginning of the year, they did win by 17 points, and that wasn't very close. They lost by 19. I don't think it was really that close. Sorry, I said 19. I mean 25. Sorry, 20. Why am I math today? 23. Again, Murray had a decent year, not his best year, but stat-wise looks pretty good, at least all right. And then the rushing yards, obviously, Kyler's pretty good at that. But that's the Cardinals there. And then in the draft, they haven't getting George Karlaftis, who I'm not sure they will. I think they might go guard Kenyon Green or Zion Johnson. Receiver is possible because since he lost Kirk, but I know they have plenty of weapons still. Lost Edmonds as well, so running back is in play here. But yeah, Ed Rusher makes sense when you lose Chandler Jones. And you got JJ Watt still on the roster for at least this next year. And they lose Also Jordan Hicks, but they got some good linebackers they drafted in recent drafts. So you got safeties, you got corner, is always potentially, position they address. But yeah, and then we're gonna go to the Cowboys, who, you know, were the whatever they were the third seed in the NFC. They went 12-5. So they won the NFC East. He had a surprisingly close game, more closer than most people thought in Week 1. Beat the Chargers again. I don't think they were favored in that game, but they won it. Defeat Philadelphia pretty good, which they did both times. One was late in the year, very last game with a bunch of backups. Beat the Panthers when they were 3-0. They killed the Giants in the first matchup. The second one, the offense, the Giants didn't do much, so they just did what they didn't want to make many mistakes, and they just played it safe, and they could do that against that team. Then they won an overtime game against New England. Also had a close win against Minnesota with Cooper Rush. Gets surprised by Denver in a loss. Destroy Atlanta. And, have a close game, which the Dolphins didn't do much against Kansas City. Losing overtime against Oakland, Las Vegas. They win a few games in a row, especially this blowout against Washington when they had mostly backups in. Not mostly, but they got some guys off COVID, but there still was some on COVID, the COVID list, because the week before they played the Eagles with four-string quarterback. At least they had Heineke for that game, but didn't go well. Lose against Arizona, and then again they wrap it up against Philly. And the playoffs, I know they were favored. I didn't think they were going to win the game. Ultimately, they did come back, and San Francisco almost allowed them to come back, but San Francisco held on. And I know their season's remembered, proud ended, and again, not just the penalties, but also the last play of the game in the playoffs. Either way, that was their season. Now, draft-wise, obviously they can replenish the offensive line, which they have them doing here. I guess they could real receiver since they've lost Amari Cooper in a trade. Defensively, potentially an edge rusher they could get, since they don't always want to play Micah Parsons on the outside, and they only really have DeMarcus Lawrence since Randy Gregory left, and I think otherwise they're pretty good. I doubt they're going to go safety. So that would be the main weaknesses I see on this team. Go to the next pick, the Buffalo Bills. Again, right now Buffalo going into the next season are looking like the Super Bowl favorites for a few reasons, but they're the betting odds at least. And I can't really disagree with, they were very close to going to the AFC Championship game. Obviously, they lost in overtime, and now the rules changed, and it probably was really impacted by that Buffalo game against Kansas City. The year played out. I think they were underwhelming ultimately. You lose to Pittsburgh. You were thinking maybe this was a 13-3 year before in 2020. So they go in this year. You're thinking they're about the same, if not better. But they lose against Pittsburgh. They win a bunch of games. These are some shutouts. So the first 4 weeks they did shut out the opponents two of the four opponents. Washington even pretty good, and they put backups in at the end of that game. Played Kansas City, beat them pretty well. Lost a game which could have easily won. I shouldn't say couldn't easily won, but could have won against Tennessee. They're 4-2. Then they lose to Jacksonville after the Miami game. That was a surpriser. you're 5-3, and you're like, this is the team people maybe expected to be the number one seed. And they just somewhat of a slow start, not super slow, but 5-3, not a great start. Then they beat the Jets. 4 interception from Mike White, and then the Colts. That's a game where it was rainy and they just did not play well at home. Again, Jonathan Taylor, I think 5 total touchdowns. Played the Saints when, again, they weren't really at full strength on Thanksgiving. Lost to New England, that windy Monday night game. Lost in overtime to Tampa Bay, so they're 7-6. I think they might not make the playoffs now. But ultimately, did get their wins late in the year. Winning the last 4. And again, I think the Jets game was a little bit closer than people realized. Zach Wilson, I think, played all right. He just was not protected. And, the defense of the Jets kind of slowed Buffalo down, which can't be said for these other teams. I guess Atlanta also did have 3 interceptions of Josh Allen. So that's the thing to note in that game. So they beat New England. We talked about that game a little bit. And they lose to Kansas City in a game, they won earlier in the year. And, they've been playing Kansas City a lot just because they're been top of the division the last couple of years. And going in the draft, though, obviously corner, because Tre'Davious White, new guy, he's coming off an injury. You also have Levi Wallace, I think, leaving. And then, running back's possible. Offensive line is possible since you only get Safford for 1 year at guard. It's still arguably best defense in the NFL. You get Von Miller on top of it. Receivers, another thing. I thought Emmanuel Sanders and Cole Beasley at their age did not really help this team too much. Like, they're smart players and had good careers, but at their age, just could not separate. And Stephon Diggs is the only guy who can separate with McKenzie occasionally as a gadget player. That was one issue they had this year. So then we're going to go to Tennessee. Tennessee, obviously number 1 seed in the AFC, had a disappointing playoff loss. But I think people just underestimated this team a little bit. This could also be people higher on Colts, depends. Both teams kind of, one team exceeded expectation, one team didn't in terms of that. 12-5 record. You had the opening day loss, which didn't help. And you had an overtime win, which I think was like a comeback. Seattle kind of choked that game. They lose to the Jets. They're 2-2. You're like, okay, I mean, I expect this team to win the division since the rest of the division wasn't playing good at that point. And then they did win 3 games, 2 against. They had this streak of winning beating a bunch of playoff teams, you say, or even close to it. So they get to 8-2, then they lose to Houston. And a game they just turned it over a ton. It was rainy, but they were the better team. They just gave that game to Houston. Played New England. They lost to them. The only thing they had was a big run, I believe. I think it was by Foreman. I could be wrong. Either way. Nah, it wasn't by Foreman. It was someone else. Anyway, had a bye week. They won a bunch of other games. Did lose to Pittsburgh in a close game. You might feel like they dominated that game too. They just, kind of like Houston, they just gave it to the other team. So ultimately 12-5, almost could have lost this, 22-point comeback by Houston. Wasn't enough though. And they played Cincinnati. And again, kind of, I don't know if they outplayed them because Cincinnati did play all right. But they did have 9 sacks. Defense did what they needed to. Tannehill had 2 really bad interceptions, had another interception on top of that. And that's points off the boards, and that gave points to Cincinnati. And that's why they went home 1 week into the playoffs. Both number 1 seeds obviously lost like that. They haven't getting Treylon Burks, which I can understand you get an A.J. Brown type of player. I mean, also you have to look at quarterback. I think Kenny Kenny Pickett or a quarterback like that could make sense for them to develop. Since if you look back at the playoffs, what do you think cost them to lose that game? The unfortunate number, and it's not one player's fault, but Ryan Tannehill's play was one of the most important things in that game and why they didn't win. So another thing, they can get guard. They lost Saffold. Defensively, they're pretty good. So, and you got the rookie corner from last year in the draft, so maybe he plays a little bit more. So I don't think that's as big of a need. Moving on, go to the next team on our list, which is the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. So a pretty good roster. Do a couple pending free agents that are out there that they could re-sign. This is a 13-4 team. Obviously defending Super Bowl champions at the time, not anymore. But I go with there's the losses. They lose to the Rams, team with a lot of speed, gave them a lot of trouble on the offensive line. There's only a couple of games I could say they had trouble, which is like the Saints' big defensive line, which gave problems to the Bucs' offensive line. And Brady threw a couple interceptions, which didn't help. I think he also fumbled. And then they played the Saints again, lost 0-9. Again, Brady struggled, couldn't get anything going. Did have a win against Buffalo in overtime. Had a surprising Washington loss. This is one of the teams I got right almost every week. The only game I got wrong was the Washington game. I thought they were going to win that. But for me, I kind of was pretty good at predicting this team. Obviously, the weird Jets game, Tony Brown incident, but ultimately, the Jets kind of blew that game. They could have lost to the Jets. So that's mostly what I'm going to talk about this season. Obviously, a crazy game with Indy they played. They beat the Eagles. It wasn't even really that close. Won by 16. And they played the Rams, and Rams gave them all the opportunities in the world to come back, and they did come back. There was a couple of stops by the Rams, and really just one stop late in the game, which helped them, defend their lead. Just the four fumbles or four turnovers, whatever it was, the Rams just almost gave them that game. And Tom Brady, when you give them that many chances, usually will take advantage of that, which they did for the most part. But ultimately, still lost. Really, Brady let him back. It was just the deep pass to Cooper Kupp at the end of the game, which was a blown assignment. Again, in the draft, they lost both their guards. Obviously, traded for Shaq Mason, so they need a guard, more a left guard, and then defensive line maybe. You don't know if Sue's going to be returning to this team. Besides that, everything's pretty much staying the same. They got some different pieces. Potential running back as well, but I don't see that, but never know. So I'm going to the Green Bay Packers. Obviously the first seed in the NFC. I think the key takeaways is their offense played their worst game of the season in week 1 and their last game, the playoff game. Obviously, weather played a factor in the second game, but their defense did their job in that playoff game. And in the first week, obviously, neither side played well. And then they had a Minnesota loss. They had the game where Rodgers had COVID. And then they had that game with the rest of the starters for the last 32 minutes against Detroit. So they won either close games or did with, they were a team that just executed for the most part and just forced the other team to make plays. And that was the way they capitalized. They played almost like a New England style football, especially like early Tom Brady career or mid. There's a lot of other teams make the same. You have a great quarterback, arguably even the best in the league, and if you could see, not a lot of big wins. Obviously, Detroit by 18, but I can't really think of another game. Obviously, the very cold game against Minnesota against Sean Mannion as the quarterback since Kirk Cousins had COVID. A lot of the games were much closer. But ultimately, they won 13 games. They lose this, you could say, a devastating game in San Francisco, where offensively the 49ers didn't score a single touchdown. Had a blocked punt, blocked field goal, a lot of big return. They started average field position was like in the 40 something yard line. A lot of short fields all day for the 49ers. Ultimately, the defense gave up 6 points, and they ultimately didn't win. A lot late in the game, you would say that the worse the weather, probably Rodgers going to play better than Garoppolo. But the thing was that people didn't, or even myself, didn't take into account when the field got so icy. It was so hard for some of these receivers to run their routes and get downfield that just made passing the ball super hard. And on the 49ers, they did some little short passes on their last drive to get in field goal range. Obviously ran the ball. Rodgers MVP, but this team doesn't have a lot of big needs. Obviously, the receiver. A lot of people say they need a receiver. Look, in this mock draft, they get the 22 pick, which they have them taking Christian Watson from North Dakota State, and then they have taken an edge rusher. But the team need, you could say, a third outside linebacker since President's been Gary the starters. They got three really good corners, mostly outside, but I guess they could move Jair to nickel since they lost Janet Sullivan. Zadarius Smith didn't give him a lot of snaps, like 20-some last year in regular season. So defensively, they're pretty much back full strength. Not any key pieces like gone. So defensively, they should pick up. They're ninth in the league. This is the second year in defense. Probably going to be close to top five, and they add some people to their defense, some players that might even be better than that. Offensively, obviously, the new receiver, they got Sammy Watkins as a stopgap guy that makes him not the force receiver with the first round picks. Alan Lazard, obviously, he's a good number, potentially 3 receiver too. Obviously, he's been the number 2 or number 3 last year. Obviously, lost Scaling as well. They lost Equanimeous St. Brown, who didn't play a ton, honestly. So that's not really much of a loss. They might need safety. They might draft a safety because they don't have a good third safety. Henry Black's been that guy, but he wasn't really that good on special teams. And not only that, Savage and Amos could potentially be gone next year in the 2023 offseason. So that's always a need. And then right tackle, right now it would be Nyman, who was a decent undrafted left tackle that played last year for them when Bakhtiari was injured. So we get Bakhtiari coming back, hopefully, for them. And then you also got Elgin Jenkins coming back off an injury. Offensive line is pretty good. They lost some guys. They had like 10 guys that could probably start in this league. And they lost Ben Brain, went to Denver, I believe. Lucas Patrick to Chicago. Billy Turner to Denver. And then Dennis Kelly's a free agent, so they could always pick him up. But right now it should be Nyman at right tackle, Bakhtiari in left, Alvin Jenkins, you got John Runyon, you got Josh Meyer. So they still have a good offensive line. Potentially draft some guy, though, to be the future right tackle. Not necessarily be the starter day one. And tight end, I guess, Tunyon's back, 1-year deal. They have Josiah Deguara, who has really not shown a ton. He had Sternberger, who they drafted, but he's off the team last year. Maybe the middle of the year they got rid of him. So that didn't really work out as a third-round pick. Again, we've been on the Packers for a while, but that's kind of their needs. Now, let's go to, you got the Kansas City, you got the 49ers. We're going to go with the 49ers right now. Obviously, this was a wild card team that ultimately upset Dallas. They had Trey Lance played start 2 games, one against Houston, which they won, and one against Arizona, which they lost. They had a slow start of the year. Were 3-5 at one point. Ultimately turned it around. Did lose to Indy in the rain early in the year after the bye. They also had a loss, which they could have easily won, was against Tennessee. Garoppolo threw some dumb interceptions in that game. And for them to get in the playoffs, they needed to beat the Rams, and they ultimately did, which forced the Rams to be the 4th seed in the NFC. They ultimately still won the Super Bowl. But, so they went to Dallas, won there. They went to Green Bay, they won there. And they went to the Rams and ultimately lost, having a 17-7 lead. Ultimately, the Rams in the fourth quarter came back, and they made the defensive play at the end of the game to end the season for the 49ers. So in the draft, they traded their first-round pick, so there's not much to discuss there. Their team, though, again, the Deebo Samuel thing's has been the breaking news the last couple of days. If for some reason get first-round picks, probably going to get a receiver because they would only have Ayuk on the roster. That would be, you could say, a good starter. If you even want to go there, some people don't really like Ayuk, and I understand. So you have that. Also, some running backs in free agency. I don't think they're going to go there, though. Got the quarterback of the future, supposedly, in Trey Lance. And tight end, you have George Kittle. So offensive line, I doubt they're going to go there, but always a potential. And then defensively, you got Bosa's coming up. You need to sign his contract, so maybe get another guy there. D Ford, I don't really know what they're going to do with him. If they're going to really keep him for another year or not. But corner is another thing. They're weak at corner, but the way they play, they don't really necessarily need great corners on their team. So that's the 49ers need. The Chiefs, get 2 first-round picks. Let's go to their season really quick. Whenever it loads, but Kansas City, expected to be better than they were. They had a lot of offensive struggles for whatever reason, pretty much all year. Never really could be in that really good groove, except in say for a 6-quarter span against Buffalo in playoffs and the first half against Cincinnati. They did really well. Still went 12-5, so not bad. Had a close game against Cleveland. They lost a game they probably should have won against Baltimore. They lost the Chargers, very close game. Lost to Buffalo, so that's why they were 2-3. Then they went on a winning streak. Pretty much the only loss was the Tennessee game. Then they scored 3 points. And Mahomes got hurt at the very end, but he did come back the next week. They had an overtime game against Chargers, which Chargers kind of gave them that. They had multiple opportunities to get any kind of points, and because they didn't, allowed Kansas City to go downfield, tie it up, and then go to overtime and then win it. They also lost to Cincinnati again, very close in the regular season before they had that playoff loss against them. Had a close game against Denver in the end of the year on Saturday. So they beat Pittsburgh. They should have won. Expected to win that game. Won by 21. Buffalo game was a crazy game, obviously. They won that in overtime. And they went to overtime against Cincinnati, and Mahomes threw that interception. They did nothing. Didn't really do much in the second half. And they also had the points they could have had before half. People just kind of forget that. The dumb things Kansas City did this year, they could have been the Super Bowl champs if they just don't make these silly mistakes like the Tyreek Hill play right before half. That's potential points there. You had no offense to speak of in the second half. You had a lot of sacks, a lot of dumb plays, interceptions, all kinds of things that, Cincinnati won that game. Again, 2 first-round picks. No Tyreek Hill anymore with the trade. So receivers obviously a need. Safety, possibly they got Justin Reed to replace Tyrann Mathieu. Edge rusher is another thing they could get. Potentially a tight end. I don't really think they're going to try to replace Kelsey this quick or this early, but it's coming up. He's in the getting closer to the mid-30s, still in his early 30s, but that's something you have to look at. Online, they really improved last offseason, so I don't think they're going to go that route. And defensively, really, they could add anywhere. I mean, I would think edge rusher is the biggest need. Also lost Jaron Reed in free agency, so defensive tackle is also a possibility. I'm not going to go over the Super Bowl teams other than Rams don't have the first round pick. Cincinnati does. They obviously lost the Super Bowl. You could say a Cinderella type of season. Obviously, it didn't end the way they wanted. But to get defensive tackle, they did lose Ogunjobi potentially. I think he's still a free agent. Or did he sign? Either way, he was going to sign with the Bears. I know he failed the physical. So that's also, that is a need. They could also get defensive end. Since really the main guy is Trey Henderson, and they do have Sam Hubbard and guys like that. But that's always a need there. Corner, obviously they get a good corner that would really help them. Eli Apple is not a great second corner. He's a decent fourth. You get him as your backup outside corner, that's fine. You can rely on him a few games maybe. But to be the starter every week, no, he's a former first round pick, but he's just not that type of player. He hasn't at least shown that. Offensively, though, offensive line could always still improve, and you can overdo it. Like, I know you signed a lot of different pieces, but even if you need to change out 4 of the 5 pieces in 1 year, with how bad their offensive line was, giving up the most sacks, why not do it? Let's protect your franchise quarterback. I guess tight ends and also a spot since he lost Uzama in free agency to the Jets. Again, Rams don't have the first round pick, so nothing really to talk about here. They're Super Bowl champions, though. And they got the most compensatory picks in the draft. So that's the reason they have 8 picks. And that's their type of style, trade a bunch of guys. They become free. If they become free agents, you get the compensatory pick, so you can just fill the little holes you have on your roster. And they've been pretty good drafting. It's just the high picks they don't really keep. They keep the mid picks, and they get guys like Van Jefferson or guys like that can help their team. Don't have a lot of holes. Offensive line isn't that great. They could go there in the draft to help that out, maybe in the second round. Safety, maybe get a safety. You don't really need that much, but always could improve that spot. Corner, they lost Darius Williams in free agency. Corner could be a spot. So the secondary is somewhat of a hole. Got Bobby Wagner's free agency. So, Allen Robinson they signed too, but they traded Robert Woods. And then who knows if OBJ comes back since he has an injury. He probably won't be signed until later in the offseason, if not before the season. Again, thanks for watching. Hopefully you enjoyed this breakdown of most of the playoff teams. We just did 12 teams right now. We'll do some kind of a mock draft or something next week, either Tuesday or Wednesday. So, be ready for that. And again, enjoy your weekend and have a great day.